Hey, this is Josh Green with Alchemy Design and Development and Traverse Capital, and I'm here today with Greg Day from Hunt Day.
Correct. Yeah.
And Greg is a friend of mine. We used to work together at a previous company, and he is our civil engineer on our 21st Street project in Ogden. And so, a lot of times, you only see the developer as the face of a project, and really there's a lot of people involved, sometimes behind the scenes, and engineers are generally more kind of behind the scenes role, right? You don't see them very often, but Greg and his team have been just amazing on this project in Ogden, and kind of gone above and beyond to help get our project approved, which we just got site plan approval recently, and we're in for building permits. And so anyway, I wanted to have Greg on and kind of give his background and talk through a little bit the 21st Street project that we're working on. So, Greg, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story, how you got to be an engineer, developer? You do a lot of things, right? But give us your background.
Yeah, happy to do it. So maybe kind of going way back, my dad was a bricklayer, and this is, he grew up and quickly went into the trades. And so when I was growing up, I grew up kind of on the construction site from a very young age, clear until, I decided to kind of pursue college and be an engineer. And back when my dad was laying brick, it was interesting because the bricklayer actually all the homes were all brick. And so they were one of the most important trades on a site. Mm-hmm. So my dad had a lot of clout, I guess is the best way to put it. This is in the 70s and the 80s. And my dad became very well known and respected with a lot of developers. I didn't know that until later in my career, believe it or not. But my dad was very blue collar. We grew up very blue collar. My dad was very successful. I never knew it. We just drove an old truck, and kind of we were just trade people. I loved it. I loved the trades. I loved the camaraderie out in the field. I loved the humor. I love the humility of it, and I just really love building things. And so when I had a chance to decide, hey, what do I want to do? My dad said, hey, I don't want you to be a bricklayer. I want you to go to college. So he was very much adamant I go to college, and decided to be a civil engineer very young, and kind of went down that path. Graduated from Utah State as a civil engineer, worked my way through college. I worked at an engineering firm throughout my college career, so 4 or 5 years. Graduated, went to work for a few different firms in different, trying to find my footing, right? Mm-hmm. Like, do I want to specialize here? Do I want to do there? And I went to work for a firm in Arizona. This is when things were just going gangbusters, and had a great experience there. And they had an office in Mexico, and so I went down and worked in Mexico. So I kind of
That's awesome.
I was learning the process of, the importance of processes, and the importance of, systems. And, when you have, 200 employees and you're working on a 200 unit development, how do you get everybody on board? And that was really interesting. Went to work for a small company and kind of learned the scrappy nature that a small company is when you're, you're trying to make payroll in 2 weeks, and you're trying to collect, and you got to get this project done, and you really can't pass the buck to anybody else, and you're right. HR, and you're, so I learned that, and had a great time there, but kind of settle into land development is what I wanted to do in engineering. And I come out of college 2006, and the market was just red hot, and could find a job anywhere, and started working, and honestly a little bit oblivious to really how real estate works, right? Because all I had known was, man, this is like red hot, times are good, it doesn't matter what you do, it's always good, Well, quickly found out that that's not the case. And, 2007 kind of hit, and I remember distinctly getting phone calls from, my clients, hey, stop work on my project and don't work on it again. And I'm probably not going to pay you, and you're probably not going to see another project from me for a while.
Oh man!
And it was 2007, 2008. It was it was quite humbling, right? Like all of a sudden you go from red hot market to there's like nothing, and you know, trying to find work. And I started. I really learned to be kind of scrappy during those times, and you know, found a few developers that were doing work, and just call them up like, hey, what can I do for you? And hey, I'll do whatever. You know, very humbling. And I got involved with some other engineers, and they were just one engineer down in Salt Lake, and he was kind of starting his firm. There's 4 or 5 of us, maybe 6 of us at the most, but we were very scrappy. We didn't have a lot of overhead, and so you know, we started just calling developers and within the people we knew and helping out however we could find. And what I learned during that period was, in this business, it's about the value you can add. So we were just searching on, how do I add value?
Yeah.
How do I take this project that's got no value, and in my role as a civil engineer, in my little kind of window of the world, how do I add value for this guy? Because if this guy's successful, I'm successful. So it was a really sort of mind shift for me of, it wasn't about me being successful. It was about this guy, this developer, how's this person going to be successful? Because, you know, my goal for them was to get another project, and I get another project.
Yeah.
And so it was a great experience, and we did that. And about 2012 is when things kind of changed. It was President's Day 2012. I remember distinctly, like, yeah, we're going to make it or not. And President's Day came along, and then all of a sudden, just project after project, and it just started going. And it was a rocket ship ride for a while.
Till just recently, probably.
Probably, yeah. We grew as a company, and you know, almost 100 employees, so a lot of experience in terms of managing others and how to manage the business aspect of it. And it was really good, but man, I just really missed the roots of kind of small company. Kind of got too big for me. And I'm just not real good in a big company environment. I have some personal limitations where, you know, I'm trying to break out of those, but you know, I'm kind of built more for kind of just a smaller kind of group. But I'm not super entrepreneurial too. Like, I'm an engineer. So worked for them for a while, and got the opportunity, got invited to come over and help a local development company. That's where I met you. It was an awesome experience. It was when I kind of went there, there's a lot of things in motion, but it still felt really kind of small. And
like a startup kind of.
It felt very much.
That's what was exciting.
It was really exciting start, and like every day mattered, and it was stressful, but you kind of acclimate to that stress, and you know, how are you going to pay these bills, and you know, like I said, every single day mattered, and I loved it. Like, looking back on it, those were the best days. And then finally it hit, right? We started having some success, and we had repeated success for a while. And yeah, I just loved it, and the company grew and flourished, and a lot of great people are still over there, right? And really love it. And then I think there kind of came a point when I kind of felt like I can't add value anymore. Like, there's nothing, I can't add to this anymore. And I kind of got frustrated with myself. So I kind of stepped out and just left and said, okay, what am I going to go do? And my phone kept ringing, you know, hey, I've got a project. Will you engineer it? Will you engineer it? Or, hey, are you available? And these are just friends I've had. Finally started saying yes and yes. And, you know, I didn't want to, but so I called another engineer friend of mine and said, hey, I'm getting all this interest and doing it. I want to do 1 or 2 just for fun, but I can't do it all. And so Thomas, he's my partner in Hunt Day, and so we just kind of combined resources and kind of just making a run at it and see how it goes. So
that's awesome.
So there's kind of a brief story. I'm sure there's a lot of details in there. But.
No, that's great. Yeah, a lot of that, some of that stuff I didn't know. I didn't know you were in Arizona and Mexico, and some of the stuff about your dad and stuff. So that's awesome. So you said early on you decided, like early on you knew you wanted to be a civil engineer. Like, what was it about engineering, you know, that side of real estate that got you
it's kind of
interested?
Yeah, so that's a great question. My personality type is kind of, when I go, I go. I'm a very loyal person. That's, if you say, what are my values, loyalty. So I'm not a guy that's out there like trying to, you know, try everything. And quite quite honestly, my brother said, my brother has a friend who's a civil engineer, and he said, you should be an engineer. And from that day forward, I said, okay, I'm going to be an engineer. And like literally, that's what I did.
Really?
Yeah. And I didn't really know what a civil engineer did. I knew that, well, my brother said I should do it, so I'll do it. So I kind of fell in love that way with engineering.
Yeah. So Greg, talk about, there might be some people listening or watching that don't really know what a civil engineer is or what they do. Can you talk about that a little bit and kind of where you fit into, if someone's thinking about developing a property, kind of where
Sure.
you fit in the process?
Yeah, sure. So nobody really knows what a civil engineer does. None of my neighbors know what a civil engineer does. My family doesn't, and we just don't get a lot of glory, but we actually do quite a bit.
Totally.
Architects, they go vertical. Builders go vertical. Civil engineers, we design everything that goes horizontal. We work with planners. They'll kind of do more of the aesthetic. We kind of are the nuts and bolts on how it works. The way the market's kind of growing, and specific to real estate, is the way cities are kind of throttling growth. If they want to limit growth or if they want to accelerate growth, they're using a lot more engineers to do that, and the regulatory burden that they place on it. You have to be able to show capacity with your pipes. You have all these rules, and so engineers are taking more of a prominent role within the land use aspect of it, and to throttle up and down growth. So in the past, to be an engineer where you could simply design a road and that made you a talented engineer, that's probably in a bygone era. Now you have to be able to communicate that. You kind of have to get in the mix a little bit, and you have to kind of learn what that land use world looks like. And so the world that I live in is that. Mm-hmm. I'm not the best engineer. I'm not the most talented engineer, but I've really tried to learn what those regulatory burdens are and try to help people kind of navigate those and try to best position their project so that they can receive those approvals and they can move forward.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, you guys were awesome on our 21st Street project. We just got site plan approval in 4 rounds of comments, which is, I think, super fast in Ogden. I know people that are on like their 8th round, and still haven't gotten approvals. And I think exactly like you're saying, the difference was that you're not just drawing the plan with the roads and everything and submitting it and waiting for feedback. You guys were actually there in their office talking to the engineer, working through different questions, making sure you were on the same page before going back and updating your drawings and resubmitting. And I think that was huge in how fast. I mean, the credit is all yours. I don't know anything about engineering, and so you guys really took that and just ran with it, and I think went above and beyond. And I think it's really to your credit that we got through so fast because you did all those things. And so can you talk about our experience with different municipalities is, like you said, we usually try to do projects that fit within the current zoning. We're not asking for a rezone most of the time, or we're not asking for any variances. We try to fit in the box for speed mostly,
Sure.
And not to have to go through those extra meetings and approvals. But what's slowed us down, or what's been the bottleneck, is kind of like you said, is the engineering department and sometimes the fire marshal. Kind of some of those more, I don't know, I guess technical kind of professions, right? And so again, you guys were awesome on helping us kind of navigate that process. And I don't know anything about size of stormwater retention or anything like that, and you guys do. And so it's nice to have someone like you guys that I can trust with like figuring that piece out, right? And I can focus on what I'm good at. And anyway, no, you guys were just awesome the whole way through, and really I think facilitated that approval.
It's interesting. What's really interesting is we all go get these advanced degrees, we get professional licensures, and it's all attributed to our intellect. But at the end of the day, we're all just people, and we want to be respected. Totally. We want to make the most out of our lives. And what I have found when I come up to someone who's in charge of regulating, they have rules that they're trying to apply, city standards, or they're trying to verify your plans. you know, it's hard to be told that, hey, you're wrong. It's hard to be told, hey, you're not approved. And so you kind of got to get over that criticism,
Yeah.
because the person on the other side, you got to understand their motivations. So when you go to work for a city, you got certain motivations. Your motivations may be, I want to have stability in my work life. I want to be able to get off at 5 o'clock. I don't want to take on the financial risk of maybe the private
Yeah.
sector. And so
Yeah.
when you start to understand the motivations and you step back and say, okay, why is this person not approving my plans? And you look at him as a human being, you have a greater chance of interacting with that person a lot more productive.
Yeah.
I know when you get comments back on your plans, you design something and there's a mistake, it's easy to get defensive, and I do it. And I'll shut my door, I'll scream and shout or whatever, but then I'll open it up, calm down. But to call that person and like respect their review and say, hey, I noticed you saw this. Thank you so much for reviewing it. Yeah, we caught this error. Hey, let me just kind of talk with you about maybe something else that we've seen applied in different cities that we think would be applicable here. Now, you can't ever, if you're not professional, if you're not technically sound, if you're just flat out wrong, like that's a problem. But there are a lot of times that someone who's reviewing your plans, they may just not have understood the situation fully. And it's not their fault, but man, they're reviewing 80 plans, or they got a bunch of other things. And so when you see them as a person, you approach them as a person, you start to understand them. You don't necessarily need to develop a friendship, but you develop an understanding. Because at the end of the day, when I call that person, I want them to pick up the phone. I don't want them to see my number and be like, oh yeah, I don't want to talk to Greg. He's going to argue with me about whatever, or, you go drop off plans at the front desk and you have a secretary there that's a mother of 4 and she's working. She'd rather not be working, but she's working. All she wants is respect, and you pay her that respect. And it goes a long ways. And I think in our business, for whatever reason, there's this tendency not to respect each other. I've just noticed it a million times. I don't know if it's a competition to find out, who's brighter or, who drives a nicer car. There's this competition, but we're all really we're just trying to advance our project. And so that's one thing that we focus in on. Okay, let's add the human element back into it and, give this respect to people. And I think we get better outcomes in terms of timing and all these ways, So that's one thing that we're trying to add into it that maybe, can differentiate us from others.
Yeah, I love that. I think in kind of the real estate industry and, development, whatever, there can be a lot of egos, right? And competition, and, I've got to win at the expense of other people. And that's just that's not who I am, right? You talked about, some of your values and stuff, and I'm just the same way. There's everyone can win, and we're better off, collaborating and like you said, respecting each other, like understanding each other, right? And much more likely to get the outcomes that we want, right? By taking that extra step and that time than just, coming in like a bulldog and demanding things. So yeah, I love that you brought that up. So let's talk about this project in Ogden a little bit. So we just got approved for 24 townhomes. They'll all be for rent. We had to do a couple kind of unique things because of the zoning. We had to add a little amenity space, interior amenity space, and some things on the outside. But can you talk maybe a little bit about that project specifically and like kind of some of the things we had to work around? Like I know we had to retain all our stormwater. There were some questions about whether or not we were going to improve that whole water line on 21st. But can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the challenges or things on that project specifically?
Yeah, happy to do it. So it's fun to talk to you, Josh, about this because most developers, it's my experience, don't read plans. It's the craziest thing that they'll hire me and they'll never look at my plans. They'll never know what I'm doing. And I think that's a huge mistake. Right now in the market, as I see it, it's a pretty challenging market. I think the interest rates have gone up. And so execution becomes paramount. And you kind of got to look for these corners in which you can add value. You kind of you win on the margins, I guess, is a way to play. There's guys maybe hitting home runs today, but I think most guys they're just trying to advance their project. And so as a civil engineer, that's the way I view it, is how can I help my client win on those margins? What are the little wins that I can do within his project? And what does that equate to? Hey, it's got to be an efficient site design. What are some things that I can do to minimize this cost, increase the speed of build, increases capability of getting the project approved? So you start looking at these things, and that's the role that I play. And you got to be kind of adept at it. You kind of got to know how the contractor functions. You got to know how the city reviews it. You got to know your audiences. So on your project in particular, it's an urban infill, and it's its own set of challenges. It's not greenfield. So you're dealing with an existing environment. You're dealing with existing roadways, and how do you pigeon-toe into it?
Yeah.
And honestly, it can get really expensive, right? The city's going to have these asks. We want you to replace all this existing infrastructure, and we want you to upgrade all these water lines. And so you're navigating these sort of conversations to try to winnow it down to hey, we want to do the minimum that we need to do to get service to our development, right? So I can get water and sewer and storm drain. On top of that, there's all these new regulations coming down. And you talked about underground stormwater, and the EPA. It seems like every year they're unleashing new rules on us, and so we've got to be up to speed on that. In your particular project, what we've tried to do is, how do we minimize your offsite improvements? How do we minimize the amount of curb and gutter you're going to have to replace? How do we minimize the amount of trenching you're going to have to do?
Yeah.
All that kind of adds costs, and so we really try to be proactive in that and put forth a design that's really cost efficient for you, and not just doing something because that's the way you always did it, but can it function? Because if I can save you a water valve, or if I can save you a manhole, or if I can save you, cutting into an asphalt, anytime I can save you that, I'm going to try to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because you're a developer too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you understand, those costs are important to your overall project, and so I think that's a great, kind of unique background that you have too. It's where you've been on both sides, right? As an engineer working for other people, but also you've had your own projects and trying to win on the margin, like you said.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really unique and helpful background to have. And honestly, I think John, our architect, is the same way, right? He could draw just this beautiful building that we would never afford to be able to be built, but because he has that experience on the development side, we kind of balance those two things. Okay, what can we do that's functional, where tenants will want to live, but we can also actually really build, and cost effectively. So I think that's really, I think that's unique and really helped us out on this project that you have that development background too. So. So what other tips do you have for with interacting with the city, or if someone's looking to develop a property, how to work with their engineer? What kind of tips do you have for making that a smooth process?
Yeah, thinking about that, let me break it down into two kind of components.
Okay. Yeah.
One is one way you can add value to your project is through a land use change, and you can add the most value through a land use change, but they're also some of the hardest, right? There's a lot of public clamor.
Yep.
And what I've kind of learned is through those experiences going through that public clamor, really, I kind of boil it down to four things that I kind of follow. So when you go to a rezone hearing and you've got 50 people in there and they're yelling at you and they're calling you all sorts of names, you really lose your wits, believe it or not. It's really hard to navigate those waters. And social media is is awful. We tell our kids not to go on it, but we have adults all day on there saying whatever.
Yeah.
So when you go through the land use component, there's the four things that I would say you do is, one is you never lie. You can never lie. If you don't know the answer, you say, I don't know the answer. But the minute you lie in a public setting, you will get caught.
And it's on record, right?
It's on record.
Yeah.
And it may be, a subtle thing, but you've got to really never lie. And I would say that probably applies to the whole process, but really try to do that. And that's hard. People say, oh, I'm an honest person. But are you? You've got to really, really focus in on that. The second thing is never lose your integrity, right? Don't ever, purposefully do, say something you're not going to do. Don't treat someone wrong. So you always got to have integrity. Second of all, and this is one that I do believe, is you never negotiate with the mob. If someone's a bad actor, don't ever negotiate with them. You treat them respectful, but never negotiate with the mob.
Yeah.
The minute you start negotiating with a group of 50 people that hate you, like it's just not, it's unproductive, right? And then the last thing I would say when it comes to land use is you got to look at your project and say, is this the very best project that I can put forward? Is this the right project? Because if you're going to go say, I'm going to go change the use on this property, and you don't believe it's the best project, how can you convince someone? Like you just can't, right? You will fold like a piece of paper.
Yeah.
But if it's the right project, yeah, the odds of you going to the mat and fighting this battle, yeah, you'll do it. So on the land use side, those are the 4 things. And so I would recommend that to developers is do those things. I've seen guys that are incredible at their craft, and they create incredible value, and they're able to convince a lot of people, and they have a lot of success. But they generally follow those 4 things. And then I've seen some other people, probably because they just succumb to the pressure, maybe say something, or say they're not intentionally being dishonest, but they sort of meander in their conversations, or not direct, or they not. I found that if I'm just upfront and honest, hey, I can't do that, or I'm not willing to do that, it just goes a long way. So I think on the land use side, I'd say those are my 4 tips. Now, on kind of if you're going to buy something, buy right and just go develop it. I would say the number 1 tip that I would say is, I'm a civil engineer, and most developers know a civil engineer, but I think most developers believe their civil engineer is probably 1 degree away from the city. They hate the city because the city won't let them do what they want, or they hate that person over there. And their civil engineer that they hired is like, they hate them, but just hate them a little bit worse.
A little less.
A little bit less, right? A little bit less. They don't produce quick enough. They have more rounds of red lines. And so they start treating their civil engineer not as a tool to help them. They start treating them as, you're just one more impediment to me getting what I want, which is something. So finding and putting yourself, with the right team, right? And finding an engineer that you work well with. There's all sorts of good ones, and there's all sorts of bad ones, and pick one that what you like. So I'd say that's probably an important one, is pick somebody that you can work with. And then another tip that I'd give, and I got 2 more tips. One is developers don't go to work. Like if I could give a developer one tip, it would be go to work, meaning every day get up and go to work.
Yeah.
I think I've worked for a lot of developers who will call me stressed about a timeline. Hey, we need to get everything in. So we do that, and finishing the conversation, I say, hey, what are you up to? And they're up in Bear Lake, or they're down in Mexico. And I'm like, oh, so you're not even working on this. So I would say get up and go to work, right? Put in the time, put in the effort, like call the city, understand what you're doing, understand what you're asking your engineer to do, understand what you're asking your architect to do. I'm not asking you to be the brightest person in the room, but I'm asking you to participate in the process. And not just be a bystander while this train wreck's happening, but rather like get in the mix and help coordinate everything, because that's something that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So another tip for a developer would be go to work, like every day, get up and go to work. Call your engineer. Hey, what's the status update? Hey, what can I help you with? Hey, I've noticed, hey, this is taking a little bit longer. Obviously, something's like the holdup. Can I jump in and help out?
Yeah.
I don't think developers do that. Like again, they see their engineer as 1 degree away from the city, so they hate calling him.
One degree away from the city, and like one more bill that they
got
rather not pay, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah. No, I love. Just again, talking about like the human element. I think that's important too, is finding someone when you're picking an engineer that that has those kind of relationships and those skills, right? In Cedar City, we have an awesome engineer down there that he just knows everyone at the city, and he knows the standards and everything inside and out.
Yeah.
And he can go talk to those people where it would be really hard for me to,
Sure.
right? I mean, because number one, I don't know what I'm talking about, but he's also built those relationships over a long period of time, and so that's something I would add to is does your engineer have experience, like know people in the municipality you're working in, right? And
for sure,
and those personal connections, like you said earlier. So, Well, how can someone get a hold of you if they need an engineer?
Yeah, they can give me a call. My phone number, you can send me an email. I love this business. I've been in this business now for a little over 20 years in different roles, from a draftsman on up. And I absolutely love this business. I love working with cities. I love the strategy. I love doing hard things. I love climbing those mountains, right? And
Yeah.
I love seeing the fruits of it, right? When I drive around town and I see an apartment complex, I love it, right? I think, man, those are families that live in there. One thing that's really easy, I think, that happens to us in this business is get incredibly cynical. And I fight it every day, right? Because, you go on social media and they hate you. You're that developer. But honestly, the house they live in, someone built, and it's one of the coolest things to be able to provide that. You can get a hold of me and call me 801-814-1778 or send me an email at greg@huntday.co, and we can sit down, talk about your project and what we can do to kind of help you out.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this and for all your help on our project. And, I just, I really believe that, I think we work well together because we have a lot of the same values. And I think it's important to find people like that, in, every part of your life, right? That shares the same values that you can work well with. And I definitely put you into that category.
Thank you.
Feel like we work well together and we want the same things. And so, yeah, I appreciate all you do.
Yeah, thank you. This is awesome.